The message came on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. For 300 years, humanity had looked at the stars and wondered if anyone was out there. They had sent radio signals into the darkness. They had launched probes that would take thousands of years to reach the nearest stars. They had built telescopes that could see galaxies billions of light years away. And in all that time, they had found nothing. No answer, no sign of life, just silence. Then the silence ended. The signal arrived at a small research station on the dark side of the moon. A young technician named Kevin Park was the first to see it. He was 26 years old, tired from a long night shift, and drinking his third cup of coffee when his computer screen lit up with something impossible. It was not random noise. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a message, clear and structured, repeating itself over and over again in a mathematical pattern that no natural process could create. Kevin stared at the screen for a full minute before he called his supervisor. Within an hour, the message had been sent to every major government on Earth. Within a day, the best minds in the world were working to decode it. Within a week, they had succeeded. The message was simple. It was also terrifying. It said, "The species known as humanity is summoned to appear before the Galactic Council. You will present yourselves at the coordinates provided within one standard galactic cycle. Failure to appear will be considered an act of aggression and will be met with appropriate response." There was no greeting, no welcome, no congratulations on finally being noticed. Just a demand and a threat. The world went into chaos. Some people celebrated. After all, this was proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. Others panicked, convinced that alien invasion was coming. Governments held emergency meetings. Religious leaders gave speeches. Scientists argued about what it all meant. But in the end, there was only one choice. Humanity had to go. The problem was that humanity did not have a ship capable of reaching the coordinates. The message had included technical data, almost like instructions, showing how to build a faster-than-light engine. It was as if the council was saying, "We know you cannot reach us on your own. Here is how to do it. Now, come." It took humanity 5 months to build the engine. It was the fastest any species had ever developed the technology. But the humans did not know that. They only knew that they were running out of time. The ship was called the Liberty's Edge. It was not a warship, though it carried weapons. It was not a cargo ship, though it carried supplies. It was a diplomatic vessel, designed to carry humanity's representatives to face whatever waited for them among the stars. Daniel Carter was chosen to lead the mission. He was 53 years old, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent most of his life as a professor, teaching law and history at a university in Boston. He had written books about international relations and conflict resolution. He had never been a soldier. He had never been a politician. He had never wanted to be famous. But when the United Nations asked him to be humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council, he said yes. He said yes because someone had to do it. He said yes because he had studied history, and he knew what happened to civilizations that appeared weak before stronger powers. He said yes because he was more angry than afraid. The night before the launch, Daniel sat alone in his quarters on the Liberty's Edge. The ship was docked at a space station above Earth, waiting for final preparations. Through his window, he could see the blue curve of the planet below, the place where 8 billion people were waiting to learn their fate. There was a knock at his door. Lieutenant Laura Bennett stepped inside. She was 31 years old, with dark hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. She had been assigned as Daniel's aide, his assistant, his translator, and if necessary, his protector. She was one of the best officers in the newly formed Terran Defense Force. And she had volunteered for this mission without hesitation. She was also one of the few people on the ship who did not treat Daniel like he was already dead. Laura handed him a tablet. On it was everything humanity had managed to learn about the Galactic Council in the past 6 months. It was not much, but it was enough to worry him. The council had existed for more than 12,000 years. It governed over 900 different species, spread across the galaxy. It controlled trade, resolved disputes, and maintained what it called galactic stability. No species had ever successfully defied it. No species had ever left it. And several species, according to fragmentary records found in ancient ruins on Mars, had simply vanished after coming into contact with it. Daniel read through the data slowly. When he finished, he set the tablet down and looked at Laura. "How many species have they destroyed?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. Laura shook her head. "We do not know for certain. The records are incomplete. But based on what we have found, it could be dozens. Maybe hundreds." Daniel nodded. He was not surprised. He had suspected as much from the tone of the message. The council had not invited humanity. It had summoned them. Like a judge summoning a criminal. Like a king summoning a peasant. "They think we are nothing," he said. "Just another primitive species to be judged and controlled." Laura sat down across from him. "What are you going to do?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Through the window, the lights of cities sparkled on the night side of Earth. Millions of people going about their lives, unaware of what was coming, trusting their leaders to protect them. "I am going to do what humans have always done," Daniel said finally. "I am going to refuse to kneel." Laura studied his face. She saw no fear there, only determination. She had served under many officers in her career. Some were brave, some were smart. Very few were both. But in Daniel Carter, she saw something else entirely. She saw a man who understood exactly what he was walking into and had decided to walk in anyway. The launch happened the next morning. The Liberty's Edge undocked from the station, turned toward the distant stars, and engaged its new engine. Space bent around the ship, light stretched into infinite lines. And then, in a flash that left observers gasping, the ship was gone. Humanity was on its way. The journey took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of faster-than-light travel through regions of space that no human had ever seen. 3 weeks of preparation, planning, and quiet fear. The crew of the Liberty's Edge did their jobs, ran their drills, and tried not to think about what was waiting for them at the end. Daniel spent most of his time reading. He read everything he could find about diplomacy, about negotiation, about the psychology of power. He read history, looking for examples of how smaller nations had faced larger empires. He read philosophy, searching for wisdom that might help him in the days ahead. But mostly, he thought about his family. His wife had died 5 years ago. His daughter lived in California with her husband and 2 children. He had said goodbye to them before leaving Earth, knowing that he might never see them again. He kept a picture of them on his desk. Sometimes, late at night, he would look at it and wonder if he was doing the right thing. Then he would remember the tone of the council's message, and his doubt would turn back into anger. On the 20th day, the ship's sensors detected the council's home system. The crew gathered on the bridge to watch as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel and saw what waited for them. It was a ring. A massive ring of metal and light, so large that it circled an entire star. Thousands of ships moved around it, like insects around a hive. Lights glittered along its surface, the signs of countless civilizations living and working within its walls. No one on the bridge spoke. They had known the council was old and powerful, but seeing it, actually seeing the scale of what they faced, was something else entirely. Laura stepped up beside Daniel. She kept her voice steady, but he could hear the tension underneath. "That is where we are going," she said. Daniel nodded. He looked at the ring, at the ships, at the sheer, overwhelming size of it all. "Yes," he said. "That is where we are going." He straightened his shoulders, pushed down his fear, and prepared to face the galaxy. The docking process took 4 hours. The Liberty's edge was guided by automated systems toward a small section of the ring station. Along the way, Daniel watched through the viewport as they passed ships of every shape and size. Some were smooth and silver, moving through space like fish through water. Others were jagged and dark, covered in strange markings that might have been writing, or might have been something else entirely. A few were so alien that Daniel's mind could not make sense of their shapes at all. Laura stood beside him, recording everything with a small camera built into her uniform. "There must be thousands of species here," she said quietly. "More," Daniel replied. The reports said over 900, but that was probably just the member species. There could be hundreds more who were not important enough to be counted. When the ship finally docked, a message appeared on their screens. It gave them instructions in perfect English, telling them where to go and what to do. A small group would be allowed to leave the ship. Weapons would be permitted, but their use would be considered an act of war. The ambassador would be expected to speak on behalf of his entire species. Daniel read the instructions twice, then turned to his team. There were 6 of them in total. Daniel and Laura would go first. Behind them would be 4 security officers, chosen for their calm nerves and steady hands. They wore the gray uniforms of the Terran Defense Force and carried sidearms at their hips. They were not soldiers today. They were witnesses. The airlock opened, and they stepped out onto the station. The corridor was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Daniel could barely see it. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The floor was smooth and warm beneath their feet. Everything was clean, perfect, and completely empty. They walked for 10 minutes before they saw another living being. It was waiting for them at the entrance to a large room. It stood on 4 legs and had a body like a horse, but its head was elongated and covered in small eyes that watched them from every angle. It wore a silver band around its neck that glowed when it spoke. "You are the humans," it said. The words came through Daniel's translation implant, turning the alien sounds into English. "Follow me." It turned and walked into the room without waiting for a response. Daniel exchanged a glance with Laura, then followed. The room beyond was the largest space Daniel had ever seen. It was a dome, easily a mile across, with seats rising up in all directions like a stadium. But instead of a sports field at the center, there was a raised platform surrounded by empty air, and instead of spectators, the seats were filled with aliens. Daniel tried to count them and gave up. There were hundreds, maybe thousands, of different species in that room. Some were small, no bigger than dogs. Others were massive, filling entire sections of seating with their bulk. Some floated in the air, supported by technology or biology that Daniel could not understand. Others sat in special chairs that bubbled with strange liquids or glowed with artificial light. And all of them were watching him. The guide led Daniel to the central platform and stopped. "You will speak from here," it said. "The council will listen. The speaker will question you. Do not leave the platform until you are dismissed." Then it was gone, walking away without another word. Daniel stepped onto the platform. Laura and the security team stayed at the edge of the room, close enough to reach him if something went wrong, far enough to show that humanity came in peace. At least for now. For a long moment, nothing happened. Daniel stood alone in the center of the dome, surrounded by silence. He could feel the weight of all those eyes on him. He could feel the judgment in the air. The assumption that he was nothing. That humanity was nothing. That this trial was already over before it had begun. Then a voice spoke. It came from above, from a creature that floated near the top of the dome. It was made of light, or something like light, with long tendrils that moved slowly through the air like seaweed in water. Its voice was calm and cold, the voice of something that had seen civilizations rise and fall and had learned to care about none of them. "You are the representative of the species called humanity." It was not a question. But Daniel answered anyway. "I am. You have been summoned to answer for the actions of your species. In the past 200 years, You have expanded from your origin world to 14 star systems. You have developed weapons of significant destructive power. You have made no attempt to contact the Council or request guidance in your development. You have acted as if the laws of this galaxy do not apply to you. Daniel listened without expression. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. How do you respond to these charges? The dome fell silent. Thousands of aliens waited for his answer. Daniel knew that what he said next would determine the fate of his entire species. He knew that the wrong words could mean war, could mean destruction, could mean the end of everything humanity had built. He also knew that the right words would not save them either. They just wanted to hear the humans beg. Daniel had no intention of begging. He took a breath and spoke clearly. Before I respond, he said, I would like to ask a question. A ripple passed through the crowd. Aliens shifted in their seats. The speaker's tendrils twitched with something that might have been surprise or annoyance. You may ask, the speaker said. Daniel nodded. Thank you. My question is this. How many species has this council rejected, quarantined, or destroyed since its founding? The silence that followed was different from before. It was heavier, darker, filled with something that felt almost like fear. Daniel watched the delegates around him. He saw them looking at each other, exchanging glances that needed no translation. That question is not relevant to your hearing, the speaker said. Daniel smiled slightly. I think it is. The speaker's voice grew colder. You are here to answer for your species, not to question this council. And I will answer, Daniel said. But first I want everyone in this room to understand something. Humanity did not come here in ignorance. We know what this council is. We know what it has done. And we know what it plans to do to us. The murmurs started then. Quiet at first, then growing louder. Daniel could hear anger in some of those voices, fear in others, and something else too. Something that sounded almost like agreement. The speaker raised its tendrils, calling for silence. You make bold claims, human. Do you have evidence to support them? Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small crystal. It was a data storage device, loaded with everything humanity had managed to learn about the Council's history. It had taken months to gather. It had cost lives. And now it was time to use it. I do, Daniel said. And with the Council's permission, I would like to present it. The speaker hesitated. Daniel could see it calculating, trying to decide whether to allow this or shut it down. Around the dome, the delegates were watching with new interest. Whatever happened next, they wanted to see it. Finally, the speaker made its decision. You may proceed. Daniel activated the crystal, and the dome filled with light. Laura watched from the edge of the room, her hand resting on her sidearm. She had seen Daniel prepare for this moment. She had helped him gather the evidence, sort through the data, and build the case he was about to make. But seeing it happen, seeing one human stand before the entire galaxy and refuse to back down, was something else entirely. She felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt proud. The light from the crystal spread across the dome, forming images and words that everyone could see. And as Daniel began to speak, explaining what humanity had learned and what it meant, Laura realized that this was not just a hearing anymore. It was a trial. But the council was not the judge. Humanity was. The images hung in the air above the council chamber, bright and impossible to ignore. Daniel stood at the center of the platform, the data crystal in his hand glowing softly as it projected humanity's evidence for all to see. Around him, 900 species sat in stunned silence. The speaker floated above, its tendrils frozen in place. Let me tell you a story, Daniel began. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a teacher explaining a difficult lesson. It is not a happy story, but it is a true one. He gestured, and the first image expanded. It showed a planet, green and blue and beautiful, covered in forests and oceans. It looked almost like Earth, This is Velthari Prime, Daniel said. 17,000 years ago, it was home to a species called the Velthari. They were peaceful people. They loved music and art and the study of the natural world. When they discovered faster-than-light travel, they were excited. They wanted to meet other species, to learn from them, to share what they knew. He paused, letting the image sink in. The Velthari sent out ships in all directions. One of those ships found this council. Or rather, the organization that existed before this council was formed. The Velthari asked to join. They wanted to be part of the galactic community. Daniel changed the image. The same planet appeared, but now it was different. The green was gone. The blue was gone. The surface was blackened and cracked, covered in ash and shadow. Nothing lived there anymore. They were rejected, Daniel said. The ruling powers of that time decided that the Velthari were too primitive, too young, too different. They were seen as a threat to stability, and so they were destroyed. The murmurs started immediately. Aliens shifted in their seats, exchanging looks of shock and disbelief. A few shouted objections, their words lost in the growing noise. The speaker's voice cut through the chaos. These claims are unsubstantiated. You cannot prove that the council was responsible for this. Daniel nodded slowly. You are right. I cannot prove it directly. The records from that time are incomplete. But I can show you patterns. And patterns do not lie. He changed the image again. Another planet appeared. This one, red and rocky, dotted with domed cities. This is Rithani 7, Daniel continued. 12,000 years ago, the Rithani Collective was a thriving civilization with 14 colony worlds. They were one of the founding members of this council, but they grew unhappy with how things were run. They believed the council was too controlling, too focused on maintaining power rather than helping its members. So they proposed forming an independent alliance, a group of species that would trade and cooperate outside council jurisdiction. He let the silence stretch. The council called this a threat to galactic stability. The Rithani worlds were blockaded. No ships were allowed in or out. No food, no medicine, no supplies. The blockade lasted for 200 years. By the end, the Rithani were gone. Their cities were empty. Their people had starved to death, one world at a time. This time, the reaction was stronger. Daniel heard gasps, cries of anger, and something else too. He heard voices agreeing with him. Voices from species he did not recognize. Speaking in languages his implant struggled to translate. The speaker tried to regain control. The Rithani situation was complex. There were security concerns that justified the actions taken. You cannot judge decisions made thousands of years ago by modern standards. Daniel turned to face the speaker directly. His eyes were cold. Can I not? Then let me give you some more recent examples. The images changed rapidly now. Planet after planet appeared, each one ruined in different ways. Some were bombed into rubble. Others were covered in toxic clouds. A few showed no damage at all, just empty cities and silent streets where millions had once lived. 8,000 years ago, the Osari developed a new form of energy production. It was clean, efficient, and could have helped dozens of species. The council decided it was too dangerous. The Osari homeworld was quarantined. Within a generation, their civilization collapsed. 5,000 years ago, the Keth began expanding into unclaimed space. They were not hurting anyone. They were not threatening anyone. But they were growing too fast. The council sent a fleet to contain them. The Keth are now extinct. 2,000 years ago, a species called the Morthani started asking questions. They wanted to know why certain species disappeared from council records. They wanted to know what happened to the ones who spoke against the ruling powers. They found answers they were not supposed to find. Daniel paused. His voice dropped lower. The Morthani no longer exist. Their homeworld is now a mining colony operated by a council corporation. The few survivors were scattered to remote stations, forbidden from gathering, forbidden from speaking their own language, forbidden from remembering who they were. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. This is your history. This is what the Council has done for 12,000 years. Not protecting the galaxy, not maintaining peace, just eliminating anyone who might challenge your power. The dome erupted. Aliens were shouting now. Some at Daniel, some at each other, some at the speaker itself. Daniel saw fists raised, tentacles waving, lights flashing in patterns he could not understand. The noise was overwhelming. A wall of sound that crashed against him from all sides. Laura took a step forward, her hand tight on her weapon. The security team formed up behind her, ready for anything. But Daniel did not move. He stood in the center of the chaos, calm and still, waiting for the storm to pass. It took a long time. Eventually, the speaker restored order. Its voice boomed through the chamber, amplified to deafening levels, commanding silence. One by one, the delegates stopped shouting. The noise faded. The attention returned to the platform. The speaker's voice was different now. The coldness was still there. But underneath it was something else. Something that might have been worry. You have made serious accusations, human. Accusations that challenge the foundation of this council. You claim to have evidence. But evidence can be fabricated. History can be interpreted in many ways. Daniel nodded. That is true. Evidence can be faked. History can be twisted. But there is one thing that cannot be denied. He looked up at the speaker. I stand here, alone, in the center of your power. I have accused you of crimes against countless species. I have presented data that suggests a pattern of oppression and destruction stretching back thousands of years. And now, I have a simple question. He spread his hands. What are you going to do about it? The speaker did not answer immediately. Daniel could see it thinking, calculating, trying to find a response that would not make things worse. Around the chamber, the delegates watched in silence. Daniel noticed something interesting. The species sitting in the highest positions, the ones with the best seats and the most elaborate decorations, looked angry. They looked threatened. But the species sitting in the lower sections, the younger ones, the smaller ones, the ones who never got to speak, they looked different. They looked hopeful. Daniel filed that observation away for later. Finally, the speaker spoke. The council will consider your accusations. A review will be conducted. In the meantime, the charges against humanity will remain in place. You will wait for our judgment. Daniel shook his head. No. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The speaker's tendrils writhed. What did you say? I said no. Daniel's voice was firm, final, absolute. Humanity did not come here to wait for your judgment. We did not travel across the galaxy to beg for permission to exist. We came here to deliver a message. He stepped forward, to the very edge of the platform, as close to the speaker as he could get. And now I am going to deliver it. Daniel Carter stood at the edge of the platform, facing the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and felt no fear. The fear had been there before. It had been with him on the long journey from Earth, in the sleepless nights, in the quiet moments when he wondered if he was leading his species to destruction. But now, standing here, looking up at the speaker and out at the assembly of 900 civilizations, the fear was gone. In its place was something harder and colder, something that burned like fire but felt like ice. It was anger. Pure, clear, righteous anger. Daniel began to speak. 12,000 years ago, this council was created to bring order to the galaxy. That is what your histories say. That is what you tell yourselves. But I have seen the truth behind those words, and it is not pretty. He gestured at the space around him, at the crystal dome, and the glittering seats, and the countless aliens watching his every move. This is not a government. It is not an alliance. It is not a community of equals, working together for the common good. This is an empire built on fear and maintained through force, an empire that survives by crushing anyone who dares to grow too strong or think too freely. The speaker's tendrils flared with agitation. You speak without understanding. The Council has maintained peace for millennia. Without our guidance, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Species would war against each other endlessly. Civilizations would rise and fall in blood and fire. Daniel shook his head. Maybe. Or maybe that is just what you tell yourselves to justify what you do. Because I have seen the alternative. I have seen what happens when species try to live free, and it is not chaos. It is hope. He turned, addressing the entire assembly now. Not just the speaker. The Velthari wanted to explore. The Rithani wanted independence. The Osari wanted to share their knowledge. The Keth wanted to grow. The Morthani wanted to ask questions. None of them wanted war. None of them wanted to hurt anyone. They just wanted to live their own lives, on their own terms, without asking permission from powers that saw them as nothing more than threats to be eliminated. His voice rose, filling the dome. And you destroyed them. Every single one. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were different. Not because they threatened anyone's safety, but because they threatened your control. The delegates stirred. Daniel could see reactions spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Some were hostile, their bodies tensing, their eyes narrowing. But others were not. Others were leaning forward, listening, their expressions changing in ways he could not quite read, but found encouraging. He pressed on. Humanity has studied your history. We have read the records you tried to hide. We have pieced together the stories of the species you erased. And we understand now why you summoned us. It was not to judge us. It was to measure us. To see if we were weak enough to control, or dangerous enough to destroy. He paused, letting the words sink in. Well, here is your answer. Daniel reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small device. It was a communication unit, linked directly to the Liberty's edge, which was linked to a network of relay stations stretching all the way back to Earth. He pressed a button. All around the dome, screens flickered to life. Holographic displays activated. Every communication channel in the chamber was suddenly filled with the same image. Earth, spinning slowly in the darkness of space, surrounded by hundreds of warships, not primitive warships, not simple rockets and missiles. These were vessels built with technology humanity had developed in secret over the past 50 years. Technology no one in the galaxy knew they had. Sleek, fast, heavily armed ships carrying weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand nuclear fire. The assembly erupted in noise. Aliens shouted, screamed, demanded explanations. The speaker's light flickered wildly. What is this? It demanded. What have you done? Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Insurance. He turned back to face the speaker. You wanted to know how humanity would respond to your charges. Here is our response. We do not recognize your authority. We do not accept your judgment. And we will not bow to your threats. His voice was hard now. Hard as steel. Hard as the warships floating above Earth. Humanity claims its right to exist. We claim our right to expand, to explore, to build our own future without asking permission from anyone. We claim our right to make our own mistakes and learn from them. We claim our right to be free. The speaker's voice was shaking. You cannot defy the Council. No species has ever successfully resisted us. Your weapons are impressive. But they are nothing compared to the combined might of 900 civilizations. Daniel nodded. Maybe. Maybe you could destroy us if you really tried. Maybe you could send your fleets to Earth and burn our cities and kill our children. But it would cost you. He stepped forward again. We have spent the last 300 years preparing for this moment. We have studied every weapon you have ever used. We have analyzed every tactic, every strategy, every weakness. We know how you fight. We know how you think. And we have built our defenses accordingly. He looked around the dome, at the delegates who were now watching in stunned silence. If you attack us, we will fight. We will fight with everything we have. And we will not stop until we are dead or you are broken. We will make you bleed for every planet, every station, every ship. We will turn the war into a wound that never heals, a conflict that drains your resources and weakens your grip on the galaxy. His voice dropped lower. And while you are fighting us, others will be watching. Others will see that the Council can be challenged. Others will start asking questions. Others will start to hope. He pointed at the lower sections of the assembly, where the younger species sat. You have ruled through fear for 12,000 years. But fear only works as long as no one pushes back. The moment someone stands up and refuses to kneel, the illusion cracks. The moment one species shows that resistance is possible, 100 more will start to wonder if they could do the same. Daniel let the silence stretch. That is our declaration. Not a threat, but a promise. We will not attack you. We will not start a war. But if you come for us, we will end one. And whatever happens, the galaxy will never be the same. Laura watched from the edge of the chamber, her heart pounding in her chest. She had known Daniel's plan, or at least part of it. She had known about the evidence, about the accusations, about the defiant stance humanity intended to take. But she had not known about the warships. She had not known about the secret preparations. Neither had most of Earth's population. The decision had been made at the highest levels, in rooms so secret that even most government officials did not know they existed. Humanity had learned, over centuries of history, that the best way to survive was to appear weak while building strength. And now, that strength was being revealed. She looked at the screens around the chamber, at the images of human warships floating in formation above their homeworld. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek and deadly. The product of decades of secret research and hidden construction. They were not enough to defeat the entire galaxy. Nothing could be. But they were enough to make any attack costly. And sometimes, costly was enough. The speaker hovered above the assembly, its light dimming and brightening in patterns that Laura could not interpret. Around the dome, delegates were talking among themselves, their voices a constant murmur of sound. Some seemed angry. Others seemed frightened. And a few, especially among the younger species, seemed almost excited. Finally, the speaker spoke again. The Council will consider your declaration. A response will be given in due time. Until then, you may return to your vessel. Daniel shook his head. With respect, I think I will stay a little longer. The speaker's tendrils writhed. That was not a request. I understand. But I did not come here to be dismissed. I came here to be heard. And I do not think I am finished yet. He turned to the assembly once more. I have spoken to your leaders. Now I want to speak to everyone else. Daniel raised his voice. You, in the lower seats. You, who never get to speak at these gatherings. You, whose species are too young or too small or too weak to matter. You have heard what the Council has done to species like you. You have heard what they plan to do to us. And now, I want to ask you a question. He spread his arms wide. How long will you accept this? How long will you stay silent while they decide your fate? How long will you kneel? The dome was utterly silent. Every being in the chamber was watching, waiting, holding its breath. Daniel Carter smiled. Because humanity will not kneel, and if anyone else is tired of kneeling, you should know that you are not alone. The silence lasted for a very long time. Daniel stood on the platform, his words still hanging in the air, and watched the galaxy try to decide what to do with him. Around the dome, 900 species sat frozen in their seats. The speaker hovered above, its light dim and flickering. The screens showing Earth's warships continued to glow, a constant reminder of what humanity had brought to this confrontation. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence stretched on, growing heavier with each passing second. Laura kept her hand on her weapon, ready for anything. The security team stood in formation behind her, their faces blank, but their eyes alert. They had trained for combat, for violence, for the possibility that this mission would end in blood. But they had not trained for this. They had not trained for the strange, heavy quiet that filled the chamber like water filling a sinking ship. Then, something happened. In the lower sections of the assembly, where the younger species sat, a single delegate stood up. It was a small creature, no taller than a child, with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. Its species had no name that humans could pronounce, just a designation: Member Species 847. The creature looked at Daniel. Then it looked at the speaker. And then it did something that no one in that chamber had ever seen before. It bowed to the human. Not a deep bow, not a sign of submission, but a bow of respect. A bow that said, "I heard you. I understand. I agree." Another delegate stood, then another, then a dozen more. They were all from the lower sections, all from the species that never got to speak, the ones that the council had ignored for centuries. They rose from their seats and turned to face Daniel, and one by one, they bowed. The speaker's voice cracked through the silence. "What is the meaning of this? Sit down, all of you. This behavior is not appropriate." But they did not sit. More of them stood. The movement spread through the lower sections like a wave, until hundreds of delegates were on their feet, facing the platform where Daniel stood. They were not cheering. They were not shouting. They were just standing, just looking, just acknowledging that they had heard something important, and they were not willing to pretend otherwise. The older species, the powerful ones, the ones who sat in the highest seats, looked down at the display with expressions of shock and anger. Some of them shouted for order. Others simply stared, unable to understand what they were seeing. The speaker tried again. "This assembly will come to order. The human has made his statement. The council will deliberate and respond. There is no need for demonstrations." Daniel raised his hand, and the standing delegates fell silent. "I think," he said quietly, "the council has already received its response." He turned to face the speaker one last time. "You wanted to judge humanity. You wanted to decide whether we were worthy of existence, whether we should be allowed to grow, whether we should be controlled or destroyed. But you forgot something important." He gestured at the delegates who remained standing. "You forgot that you are not the only ones who get to decide. Every species in this room has a voice. Every civilization has dreams and hopes and fears. You have spent 12,000 years telling them what to think, what to believe, what to accept. But you cannot silence everyone forever." His voice was gentle now, almost sad. "Humanity is not your enemy. We do not want to destroy the council or tear down what you have built. We just want to be free. And I think, looking around this room, that we are not alone in that desire." The speaker did not respond. Its light had dimmed to almost nothing, a pale glow that barely illuminated the space around it. Whatever it was feeling, whatever calculations it was making, it kept to itself. Daniel nodded slowly. "We will leave now," he said. "We will return to Earth and wait for your decision. But remember what happened here today. Remember that humanity stood before you and refused to kneel. And remember that others are watching." He turned and walked off the platform. Laura fell into step beside him as he crossed the chamber floor. The security team formed up around them, watching for threats that never came. The standing delegates parted to let them pass, and as they walked, Daniel saw something he had not expected. He saw hope. It was in their eyes, in the way they held themselves, in the small gestures they made as he passed. A nod here, a raised hand there. One delegate, a being made of crystal and light, reached out and touched his shoulder as he walked by. It said nothing, but the touch spoke volumes. They reached the corridor outside the chamber and kept walking. The station felt different now, less oppressive, less overwhelming. The blue light of the crystal walls seemed warmer somehow. Laura waited until they were well away from the chamber before she spoke. What just happened in there? Daniel took a deep breath. I am not sure. Something I did not expect. She shook her head. Those delegates who stood up. I have never seen anything like that. They could get in serious trouble for what they did. Maybe, Daniel said. Or maybe the trouble is already here. And they know it. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to stay quiet. One voice saying what everyone else is thinking. The dam does not break all at once. It starts with cracks. They reached the Liberty's edge and boarded without incident. The docking clamps released, and the ship pulled away from the station, heading back toward the edge of the system where they could engage the faster-than-light drive. Daniel stood at the viewport, watching the massive ring station shrink behind them. All those lights, all those species, all that history, 12,000 years of power and control, threatened by a single speech from a species that most of them had never heard of before today. He did not know what would happen next. The Council could attack. They could negotiate. They could do nothing at all. The galaxy was filled with possibilities now. More possibilities than had existed since before the Council was formed. Laura joined him at the viewport. Do you think they will come for us? She asked. Daniel considered the question. Eventually. Maybe. But not right away. They are scared now. And scared people make mistakes. They need time to figure out how to respond. Time to decide if we are worth the cost of a war. And if they decide we are? Daniel smiled slightly. Then we fight. But I do not think it will come to that. Not yet. Why not? Because of what happened in that chamber. All those species, standing up, refusing to sit down. The Council cannot ignore that. If they attack us now, after what I said, after what everyone saw, they prove everything I claimed. They prove that they destroy anyone who challenges them. And that would start something they cannot control. Laura nodded slowly. She looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness between them and home. What do we do when we get back to Earth? We wait, Daniel said. We prepare. We reach out to the species who stood up today and see if they want to talk. We build alliances, make friends, show the galaxy that humanity is not the monster the Council wants them to believe. He turned away from the viewport. And we hope that what we started today grows into something bigger than us. Something that changes the galaxy forever. The Liberty's Edge activated its faster-than-light drive and vanished into the darkness, leaving the Council station far behind. In the chamber, the delegates slowly returned to their seats. The speaker hovered in silence, its light dim, its thoughts unknown. The older species whispered among themselves, making plans, considering options, trying to figure out how to respond to something that had never happened before. But in the lower sections, the younger species sat quietly, looking at each other with new eyes. They had seen something today that they would never forget. They had seen a single human stand before the greatest power in the galaxy and refuse to bow. They had seen others rise to support him, breaking centuries of silent obedience in a single moment of solidarity. They had seen hope, and hope, once planted, is very hard to kill. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, quietly, in ways that the Council could not yet see. The old order was beginning to crack. It might take years or decades or centuries, but the process had started. The first domino had fallen. Humanity had spoken, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was waiting.